Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pull Focus, the cinema-based entertainment podcast where a couple of freelancers come together to talk shop. My name is Mike, and as always, I'm joined by my brother in crime, a man whose charm is like sweet, sweet music. A man whose positivity will never be silenced. A true performer in every sense of the word or sign. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Andrus. It's not a... That's very sweet. It's not a
I just signed, hi, my name is Robert. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's so good to be here yet again. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Tell these people to be quiet and sit down. We're moving on. Please.
I think it's, we should give them a few minutes more for... No, they're done. Okay, they're fine. They've gotten into the role. After a couple years or whatever, having this captive audience in our recording studio.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure. I didn't know that was a thing. Actually, that was very sweet.
Did you learn something new?
I did learn something new, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I've known that for a very, very long time. The applause in sign language is like spirit fingers.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's very, very cool.
How are you? Let's see here. It is at the date of this recording. It's a week after Easter. Spring is coming about, and things are looking pretty good. The weather's getting better, all the good stuff. And we are going through, some of the winners of last month's Oscar awards, and doing what we can to play catch up on some of these films. One of which we'll be talking about this evening. How's everything been going for you for the past couple of weeks? Still busy as usual?
Still busy as usual. No. A lot of not literal fires, but.
Right.
But
well, it's not summer yet, but we'll get there soon enough, right?
Work-related fires. Yeah, we're not in California. Man, I hate fire season. I just do.
Yeah, me too.
It's so sad every single year.
I remember when I moved here, which will be actually, I think it's been about 10 years, if my math is right. If not 10 years, I'm very, very close since I moved to Salt Lake City. And when I was first introduced to quote unquote fire season, I was like, "You guys have that here? Oh, that can't be so bad." Oofta. It can be there have been some there could be some good years, but ultimately it can be a little heavy for sure.
But really just kind of moving right along.
Nice.
The weeks are going by faster and faster and faster. I know as we get a year closer to our retirement, things go faster and faster and faster, and they keep continuing to surprise me that's how it's going.
That's how it's going. Yeah, the ball gets rolling. It just keeps gaining momentum.
Wow.
Well, I'm good. But I've dealt with that myself. I was looking at my phone and I realized that I had pictures in my phone. I just got a new one, but it was transferred over. Thank you very much, AT&T local. Yeah,
are we pushing for sponsorship?
Not yet.
Because if we are, thank you so much, Ferrari and Lamborghini, and
absolutely. What else?
Services
Sony Entertainment Industry. God, I need a new PlayStation.
Let's
I need a new PlayStation, Andrus.
A bunch. We want sponsorship, people.
We do.
Bring it.
Make it happen. Pay us to complain about movies, please.
Pay us to talk politely about movies.
Oh yeah, excuse me. Yeah, of course. We're not going to complain.
We don't have anything negative to say about movies.
No, not at all. We are very lucky though to be able to get together and just shoot things out here. And I am actually really happy with the Oscar award-winning film that we are going to be speaking about today. It is pretty soulful. I think it misses here and there, but where it shines, it really does shine. And obviously, it has gotten enough applause, regardless of its... Oh, this is going to get super cringy, but here we go. In it to win it. Regardless of what you might think of this movie, it has received enough applause to be heard around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about CODA.
Oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah. I get a feeling that I never had before.
You're the girl with the deaf family?
Yeah. I just want to tell you right now.
And you sing. Interesting.
Something's got a hold on me here.
What are you doing next year?
Working with my family.
Let me tell you now, I've got a feeling, I feel so strange. Everything about me seems to have changed.
I've been coaching for Berklee College of Music. I can help you get a scholarship.
But I won't let go. I said,
I want to do this.
There are plenty of pretty voices with nothing to say. Do you have something to say?
You will be required to have a hearing individual on board at all times.
I can't stay with you for the rest of my life. I've never done anything without my family before.
all that I need to get by.
And that was a trailer for CODA, everybody. So, Andrus, this is the 2021 Oscar award-winning film for Best Picture. It also carried on with an incredible cast that got some accolades, specifically with a Mr. Troy Kotsur, who got Best Supporting Actor for this production. Jumping in, it is about some subject matter that I am not familiar with, but like we were talking about before we started the recording today, I am happy to say that I definitely learned a couple things from this movie. So that's already one thing that we're going to talk about, one of the positives. Let's jump into the IMDb synopsis. As a CODA, child of deaf adults, that's the acronym, Ruby is the only hearing person in her deaf family. When the family's fishing business is threatened, Ruby finds herself torn between pursuing her passion at Berklee College of Music and her fear of abandoning her parents. This particular film takes place in Gloucestershire, Massachusetts. We know that specifically because of the really lovely photography that's been brought in, and also the fact that everybody doesn't like people from Boston here, or Baston, because all the people who live in the city are kooks. But that being said, we open up with ultimately this a big shot of introduction that comes into most of these coming-of-age stories. It opens up on the Rossi family going ahead and getting their morning catch, and we are already I think, really impressed by the vocal stylings of one Amelia Jones, who was playing Ruby. Amelia being pretty, I don't want to say new, because it's always like a pretty loaded term when it comes to actors. But
as far as the fame side of recognizability, she's fairly new.
Yeah,
I would agree with you.
but she has been working for over a decade. She had parts back in 2011 for Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. She did some television work with House of Anubis, Doctor Who, Wolf Hall, and also working with Lock and Key, which is a current series that's going on. So she definitely has some stuff under her belt. She is joined by really a riveting cast. By I already mentioned Mr. Kotsur, who again plays Ruby's father, Frank, and we are joined by another Oscar award-winning, the legendary Marlee Matlin, who just by herself with her career has done so much for hearing impaired awareness and being able to provide just solid drama for her entire career of what is amounting now to more than almost 30 years on television and
Yeah.
movies. It's ridiculous.
Long time.
We have other really good supporting casts. We have Daniel Durant, who plays Leo Rossi, who plays Ruby's brother, who's also deaf in the movie. I'm not sure if Daniel himself is hearing impaired, but he is also beginning his career too. A little bit more on the tarmac with him. He was doing stuff for television back from 2008 with The Sweet Life on Deck, the archives of Gallaudet University. Switched at Birth, which was a 17 episode stint on the series, running from 2013 to 2017. So this is, you guys may be wondering as to why I'm talking about this. Oh, and also we can't forget the incredible Eugenio Derbez, who was able to provide a lovely character who embodied some teachers that I had in high school playing Bernardo Villalobos. And it's very important that you run the R's. We're going to get into Mr. V, as he's called in the movie, and some of the nostalgia that I felt with the the exercises that he was doing in choir class and all that other stuff. But Mr. Derbez has done... he has a ridiculous career in Mexican and Southern American cinema. Just some of the titles that I know him from that actually made some room here in the U.S. include things like Instructions Not Included, How to Be a Latin Lover, and he was actually able to do some work with the Nickelodeon IP Dora the Explorer with Dora and the Lost City of Gold. That's just the stuff we have off of the general.
But you forgot the most important one.
Which
the
one was
remake of Overboard.
I know the remake of Overboard.
It was a cute movie.
It was a good movie.
The original was superior.
Absolutely.
But it was cute.
But that being said, his career spans for that's the thing that kind of, and you guys might be wondering, Mike, what are you talking about? We have an Oscar award-winning film. The first thing you're talking about is just the cast and making a point of taking it into experience. And I am, because that's something that we have to kind of weigh in when it comes to the cast itself. I think that, first of all, might be a bit of a hot take in regards to this. Being an Oscar award-winning film, I had some mixed thoughts in regards to why I got Best Picture. I'll be honest.
Really?
And it's really specifically because I think with the story structure, we had a really big talent with Sian Heder, who was the director and also was the writer for the movie. She has a lovely career, but this is definitely the only film that's popping up in most of our sources that we go to look for when it comes to IMDb or the Wikipedia and that kind of thing. So unfortunately, I don't know too much about her, but she does have the capability of being able to write and direct an Oscar award-winning movie. That being said, I thought that overall the production was a little bit cliched. I mean, we have this coming-of-age story, but it's definitely more of a after-school special. We have somebody who is dealing with this problem. Ruby is not really a popular kid, right? And not only sometimes does she find herself being alienated by her family, but of course, being a CODA, she gets alienated by her cliques at high school and that kind of thing. But ultimately, she finds the saving grace, and her family understands. Goes through her own hero's journey, and then she goes out to venture into the world with the promise of getting a music degree from Berkeley. I mean, I don't know. It sounds a little bit cliched, but we'll get into that.
So my question for you before I attack you back.
of course, bring it.
Of course.
And I'll get back to my original point in a second, but I don't want to hear what you have to say.
What is your favorite coming of age story?
Teen Wolf.
Okay. Why?
I don't know. It's a comedy that shouldn't be taken seriously. I don't know. That's a good question, actually. My favorite coming of age story. I mean, coming from where I come from. And I mean, it's definitely a tie between Mr. Holland's Opus, which I think was probably did what this movie was trying to do, but did it better. And Field of Dreams, I think, was probably my favorite coming of age movie in a sense. Not because specifically it had somebody who was young and misunderstood and then brought up to become their own human being, but because it was they were both
from a teenager's perspective. I'm going to throw that qualifier in there.
From a teenager's perspective, I don't think I have one, honestly.
Okay.
So no, but that's one reason as to why we have these conversations. I mean, you're not going to be able to talk about art or film without having your own bias.
Of course,
and that definitely leaned into this movie for me. That's
so
100%.
go back to your original point for bringing that up, and then I'm going to argue why I like it.
Okay, very good. So even though I don't understand specifically, well, I do kind of understand why I got the Oscar. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it. The reason as to why I didn't stop watching the movie and why we're talking about it, back to my original point, is because we have this mix of cast members of very diversified, very varied, varying experience. And I was pleasantly surprised by how we had some of these quote unquote newcomers, right, coming into a full big studio production, mixing with people who have immense amount of experience. And sometimes when you get that going through, you get friction, and you can see it on the screen. You can see the chemistry not working or anything like that. Sometimes it becomes a situation where you can tell that the actor that has more experience in the scene is trying to teach the younger one back and forth. But I didn't get any of that here. And the reason as to why, and I think what I'm going to say next is probably going to be my entire thought process behind my confusion about this movie and also my feelings about it. I don't understand why the movie got the accolades that it did. I 110% understand why Troy Kotsur got the Oscar and why people who were in the main cast have been getting so many accolades in regards to their performances, because that was the glue that kept us together. The story, in my particular opinion, was pretty weak. It wasn't a situation where it was really anything new. It's something that we've seen over and over and over again. Mr. Holland's Opus back in the day did it better, and it was on the same subject matter. And we have these tight little packages where everybody's dreams come true, and apparently getting a music degree. It's at Berkeley, of course, I understand, but that in and of itself is cliched. Is going to make the world a better place for these people, and it's just not. They're facing bankruptcy. They're facing the problems that they're dealing with being hearing impaired. And I understand the need nowadays that having just a nice story that has a happy ending, that you can just lean into the characters more than the editorial or the message that the movie's trying to provide, is something that we might need nowadays, right? We are not necessarily coming out of COVID, but once more, it is the springtime, and we are getting into a point where people have reasons to be happier than they did during the winter. With the winter season. So maybe it's a question of timing. I don't know, but I think that's kind of my feeling behind the whole thing. Not to say there isn't interesting things happening, but it's nothing we haven't seen before. What's interesting to me are these lovely ways in which the cast are able to really push forth how the parents don't understand at first, but not because they don't want to, it's because they care about Ruby, and how Ruby has this pent-up resentment, which ends up exploding in these lovely scenes between Ruby and her parents, and especially between Ruby and her brother Leo on the beach, where I forgot.
Spoiler alert!
Spoil that.
Spoiler alert!
If you have not seen CODA yet, stop listening to the podcast. We're going to spoil everything. Watch it, come on back, and see if you agree or not. Anyway, that's pretty much my diarrhea of the mouth for now. I have some other points that I want to talk with you about, Andrus, but lay it on me. What was so good about this movie, and why do you think it should have deserved the Oscar?
So the thing that was so good about this movie is everything about it. This is probably outmatched any other idea that I have for an angsty teen coming of age story that I can remember. I take your point with Mr. Holland's Opus, because I think I'll agree with you for the most part on that. But that's also coming from adult perspective, dealing with a child who has a hearing
impairment or something.
Or was I can't remember if it was an impairment or they qualified it as deaf within the
I can't remember.
In a minute.
Yeah.
But that movie was so stinking good, and that movie was so moving and so engaging and so wonderfully done. It was a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Right.
What this one did for me was on so many different levels give me perspective in current teenager issues that are dealing with not just bullying for the sake of bullying, but the self-conflict that comes with living in that circumstance, going to school, having to grow up early, everything that
having to grow up early. That's actually a really good point.
Everything that this movie talks about is from her perspective.
Yeah.
And that's why I think for me, I'm going to call this nearly a perfect movie told from her perspective.
Okay.
Because I genuinely think this is her movie, her story.
Okay. I disagree when it comes like it being her movie and her story. I think it's really like the cast itself. But taking into consideration like what you're saying, especially like I just mentioned before, being forced to grow up early, that's actually a perspective that I'm kind of reminded of. This is why we talk about this stuff, right? You remind me of things that I missed and vice versa when it comes to the titles that we bring up. And yeah, I can kind of get on that bandwagon a bit. I think that the largest parts that I had that were kind of lagging for me, I mean, first of all, it didn't do the cardinal sin, right? We as viewers, well, I can't speak for you, but I myself, I didn't have to like fill in any of the empty spaces. I didn't have any questions. The problem was that it seemed like it was a little bit too digestible to me, and that the problems that the family ran into were just so easily taken care of. Because
I disagree. I don't think that they were easily taken care of. Okay. I think that it's the setup of it as a conflict, and the resolution does come, but they still tell that in a way that makes sense to me too. But as far as the easily digestible, I agree with you on that. Maybe because it's just a good movie.
Maybe. I mean, like we have like these. It's very possible, actually. We have like these themes that we've run into before. Like there's definitely like a working class versus upper class versus music people thing going on, right? And that's something that's been tackled in movies before so much that it's like pretty much textbook. We have this family here that is going on hard times. I mean, being a professional fisherman is as if that isn't hard enough.
Blue collar versus art.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a thing too. Like nobody understands. Well, why would you want to go into singing, Ruby? There's no money in it. Like that was the attitude that was pushed forth. That was like kind of giving Ruby a reason to not go and not be passionate. What we didn't know, which was then put in this beautiful scene between Ruby, Frank, and Jackie, where Ruby's like, in the living room, and she says, I had to live my own life. I have been interpreting for you my entire life, and I don't want it anymore. I mean, the performances are beautiful. Like Amelia Jones does an incredible job of this weird thing where she breaks down, but she breaks down quietly, which is amazing to me. Like anybody can. I mean, I'm not an actor. You're the actor. I'm gonna
cry.
Yeah, that's it. I'm leaning on you. Like anybody can just go, I can't be understood. Right, and just like this quiet resonance that she has in every scene, like really impresses me. Like that's the thing. I love the cast. I love the performance. I didn't like the pacing of the story structure. But when it comes to the I mean, am I kind of like going out of left field here? Did you not pick up like the whole class dynamic thing versus art versus work kind of situation? And hasn't it been done before?
Well, of course it's been done before. It's been done in every movie that has that dynamic in there. The one that comes to mind so easily is Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a very common, relatable topic. Mm-hmm. For movies, for understanding. I mean, it's such a thing in every movie. I mean, Some Kind of Wonderful. Let's just start naming off every single one. For sure. LA Story. There's so many across the board where the social dynamics do come into play.
Right.
They really do. Economically.
Well, then why take it? Why not make it more about Ruby and her struggle with her parents versus Ruby and the class dynamics that come into play with it?
So for me, it wasn't necessarily about class. For me, what it was was conflict within the family, and their work dynamic is affected by everything comes down to me as far as this family unit.
Right.
And again, I'm going to say that I think that it's Ruby's movie because of everything that we
agree
go
with you.
along her journey. I'm not saying that the rest of the family doesn't matter in that, because they do, because
Sure.
we do get part of their story.
Well, at the very least,
But-
they provide catalysts for like why she's making the decision she's making. She's
For
she's
sure.
getting pulled back and forth between
sure.
two things that she loves very much.
But if I were to really break it down, I would break it down to her story for me is about being an outsider in every single aspect of her life.
Well, okay.
Which is why her dream is so important for her once she realizes that she's got legs to stand on and a foundation in her dream.
Yeah.
To then pursue that, and to pursue that aggressively and not feel guilty about it, even though she does.
I think that's a good point. Like her dream definitely comes out as a surprise, even to her.
To her.
And the pacing is off, in my opinion, but like there is definitely a commitment, especially through using Mr. V as an instrument for that, to really show us that she's willing to care enough to do it. She comes about, and I mean, honestly, I'll be completely honest when it comes to like some of the things that Derbez did with perform with Mr. V. A little bit of it was stereotypical, but those same stereotypes, and I don't want to like get too much heat for this because I understand when you like, you know, what happens when you make an assumption. But I have a history in high school and college and pursuing like music and doing this kind of thing. I'm an audio guy. That's how it ended up, you know, being a place where, to your point, where I found something that I loved and I found something that I could, you know, make some scratch at and do and everything. Every music teacher that I ever had was Mr. V. The accents changed, but the whole thing where it's like, you have to feel it with your guts. I mean, it's like, and then he does these exercises where he's pressing up against her stomach. I've had to deal with that in choir and everything. It's even worse when you're trying to like learn how to do an instrument. And like the best feedback that your professor can give you is like, no, you have to feel it differently. I mean, that's, I almost got like these weird kind of like, you know, flashbacks that made me angry at this character because I'm like, she's only a kid. What are you doing? But then like later it comes off as he's there towards like the midpoint, maybe the end point of like the second act where Ruby is being forced to choose. And then the third act, we learn about like, you know, the ramifications of her choice. And then she gets a chance to change her choice. She doesn't get a chance to change her choice. Her family decides for her. And then she's able to find happiness. But through that time, you see Mr. V do the whole thing where it's like, if you're going to be late, we don't have to. Well, I'm not going to do. If you're going to be late, then we don't. Then we don't have to do this anymore. You're wasting my time. And it's a situation too where it just adds more pressure on this poor kid. Where it's like, I have to be responsible to my family. I have to be responsible to these social constructs. I have to be responsible to my love for singing, and now I have to be responsible for you too. It's like, you know. But luckily, she has enough reinforcement and, quite honestly, enough talent in order to get past that and make it to the goal line. So that's cool.
So it's funny because you asked me if I felt like the pacing was off. No,
not at all.
I was into this movie from beginning to end. I was completely invested.
You are such a sweetheart. You're such a sweetheart.
I am a sweetheart. I am. Thank you very much.
No.
I also bawled my eyes out like 6 different times.
I'll admit there were some emotional points.
Emotional.
Towards in the last act, when we find out that Ruby, like we're gonna go back and forth with this movie because that's like how I've written my notes down and everything. And this is how we have our conversations anyway. At the end of the movie, we have this beautiful scene, the scene that got Kotzer the Oscar, I think, where, you know,
father and daughter on
the back of the truck. Yeah. Frank finally made the decision, you know what? We'll deal with it because
you could see the gears turning.
He comes to realize how much he really cared. You're absolutely right. And like that comes with like its own kind of a setup too, because we have the scene earlier where they get pulled over by the Coast Guard, and it's not the situation here. That's where the blue collar versus music people really comes into play. The boat that the Rossi family is using gets not taken, but, you know, they lose their license pretty much to like fish off the shores and everything. And it was a situation that came up because Ruby, being the only person who could hear, is on the boat on the crew, which is her father and her brother Leo. And towards like this is like where the main climax comes in, and like, you know, the worlds are broken apart. Like it is reminiscent of the hero's journey, something that we talk about all the time. The hero, like, you know, gets their power,
Falls.
and falls, and then like the third act is about them getting back up and becoming even more powerful afterwards. Anyway, what happens is that the Coast Guard takes their boat. They can't do it. They can't make their income or anything like that. And Frank and
But why is the Coast Guard there? It was a sabotage.
It was a sabotage.
The auditor that was required to be on the boat.
Thank you for bringing that up.
It was so frustrating.
Thank you for bringing that up. It was a situation where they had to have an auditor on the boat because the government said so, because they had sanctions. They could only fish for a certain amount of time because they wanted to make sure that they weren't ruining the ocean and that kind of stuff. You know, real world issues that I'm sure people who are, you know, making money that way have to deal with still. But ultimately, because Ruby wasn't there, their license got revoked. And then that ends up causing all over problems. And we can tell that Frank and Jackie blame Ruby. They don't want to, but they do. And what's sad is that Ruby starts to blame herself. And the only person backing her up is her brother Leo. But she doesn't see that. She doesn't see that. And she ends up being angry at him. And Leo ends up being angry at her. And we have this lovely scene where we have just this 1v1 where Amelia and Daniel Durant are signing back and forth, and also the sign in this, like, even though there weren't words being spoken, I'll admit when it came to the family dynamic, I was drawn in to the dialogue back and forth.
You feel the dialogue,
absolutely, right? I mean, which is a testament to what these actors can do, especially seeing as Matlin and Kotzer do happen to be hearing impaired.
So does Leo.
Yeah.
Leo, I looked him up. He is also deaf. He transferred in 8th grade to a deaf school.
Awesome.
For performing arts.
Well, thank you for verifying that. Anyway, this all goes back to the main point that I'm talking about, where we have like these setups. It's a competent film. Pacing we can talk about in a minute as well, because I want to hear a bigger take from you on that. But you are right. Kotzer won the Oscar, I think, with the final scene that we see where it's just him and Amelia Jones, where Frank says, he signs, sing it for me, the song that she did for her audition. And there's this, I mean, I get a little emotional just thinking about it, honestly. Yeah. He places his hands on her throat and she starts singing the song, and he's feeling the vibrations, and there's this eye contact, and Kotzer does this amazing point where you can see Frank. I'll do this because you can
see him hear it.
You can see him hear it. You can see his face go from like, I'll give her this. I want to see if this is real. I don't believe it. I want to see if this is real. And then you can see in Kotzer's performance the way his face changes from kind of like this, okay, let's see what happens, to
I don't get it
to 100%, and he's bawling and everything. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous scene. But that's because of the cast. I mean, I know, I know one of the rules that I found out early on in my brief stint, I found off in my direct-to-video career, was that everybody's job is important. And it's true. On the set, everybody's job is important. Everybody. So when I say it's like, that's because of the cast, I don't want to take away from the beautiful shot, the cinematography, the writing that was put up so that scene made sense. I don't want to disregard that. But when you see these two actors, one who has been working for so long and one who is working for relatively less, make this thing happen in under a minute. I mean, it does take your breath away sometimes. But when do you think that, in this movie at least, was there a time where they could have used more of that? Where we could have had the cast do more heavy lifting to kind of fill out the scenes a little bit, which I think is directly related to the pacing problems that I thought this movie had.
You know, honestly, for me, I didn't have that issue.
Okay.
So I like I said, I bawled my eyes out several times throughout it, and I felt those moments come through, and it was so meaningful and impactful for me. It just made a lot of sense. That one was wow.
Yeah, that I definitely teared up with, for real.
Just wow. There's quite a few more throughout, and like I know I'm losing some right now that we're talking about it. But in the moment, I'm just like, is anybody watching me? Because man, they're gonna think.
No, I get it.
I'm watching like the saddest movie.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of feel good and inspirational, and I think that maybe that's where the whole idea of an after school special comes into play.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
For me, it wasn't an after school special because there's something for me that's a lot more cheesy and just on the nose about it, whereas this felt really complicated for me, and I know that you don't feel the same way, but for me, I felt the complication. I felt some of the exposition that they had in the storyline added so much to then knowing who these characters were.
I could see that for sure.
And how that just layered and built for me. So I thought that it was really well done.
One of the series of events directly in relation to that is in the first act, Ruby has to go to the doctors with her parents because the doctor doesn't sign, and they end up we find out that they have jock itch, and also I mean.
What a fun topic to discuss.
Yeah. Kotzer and Matlin's characterization, so they've been signing for a very long time, but the way that Kotzer uses his hands to describe it's like there's demons coming out of my, and then Matlin's right in there with they're breathing fire and all this other stuff. The way in which they are so descriptive as part of their character is ridiculously cool. The scene where he's telling Ruby how to properly put on a condom because her and her
he's actually talking to Miles.
That's right. You reminded me. Miles, who ends up being the romantic lead for Ruby.
Oh, what? Shocker!
Kind of
that one was a little too on the nose.
Right. But that's the thing. There's a series of events. They go to the doctor. They get this taken care of. Then Ruby and Miles are doing a duet together in a room, and they see that because Ruby's parents can't hear, they don't know that Miles is home. Miles is there and they're practicing. They start making love in the room down the hall, and Ruby is super embarrassed. It's completely. It's fun to see how.
It was a very loud rendition
yeah.
of making love.
Exactly.
So.
I do like how embarrassed Amelia Jones plays this, where she's running back and forth and she's flapping the lights on and off so they can see I have company here, blah, blah, blah. Then, of course, Kotzer is telling Miles how to put on the condom. He's doing stuff on his hand. And that ends up being a point that breaks the relationship between Ruby and Miles because because he tells his friend, and then that is the portal that we see to what Ruby is dealing with on all fronts. To your point, the exposition and the dialogue transference, I guess, between the characters does have a huge way of being elements in and of themselves that end up doing the sequence for the movie, that give us reasons as to why X is happening. In adventure movies, they do it by an explosion or by a quick point of dialogue or something like that. In comedic dramas like this, when they're done smart and they know that the big focus is going to be on the ensemble and not just the person, this is how good writing comes out in the movie. I just had a problem with the points within the acts that was happening and how easily the problems to go back to how they had their license taken for the boat, they were able to save themselves by starting up a co-op, which took a day apparently, which I know didn't really take a day.
It was not a day.
It totally felt like a day. It totally they got the problem and
the montage went by really quick.
It did go by real quick. But that's the thing. They got the problem and then they got the solution within the same act. That's lazy.
I understand that. I get what you're saying there.
Right.
So I can't argue that.
But I think that it's a situation too, to your point. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it has the timing that we're dealing with stuff in real life and everything too. But I don't want to be a complete cranky person in regards to this. I don't want to be a grumpy old man. I will admit that when I was done watching the movie, it was nice to get something that was uplifting and constructive.
Isn't it though?
It is.
Yeah.
Even though there were holes here and there, and
you could honestly say that this is the worst movie of all time, and I would say, okay, it wasn't for me. But it wasn't for me.
I got you. You can. That's another thing too, right? You can definitely hear my bias coming through as we're having this conversation.
For sure, and that's okay. One thing that I really, really appreciated about the way that this movie was portrayed is I am not hearing impaired. I did a little stint in ASL in high school, and
Interesting.
I've had some friends and colleagues and stuff like that go through some of these stories with their own lives. For me, this felt like very, very real and very accurate to the ASL world. So, I mean, without me knowing more about it, I would say that this is a very accurate representation of what it is. And hopefully I don't offend anybody by saying that, but ultimately that's also my opinion. So I don't care.
Well, there was,
but,
yeah.
But for me, that's the other thing that made a lot of sense for me, is because they are so alienated in a hearing world, that I got a lot out of those scenes where certainly Leo and Frank and to a smaller degree Jackie, because we only heard about her situations. We never really experienced her situations.
That's true.
Except for the co-op, but and I guess the concert. Two moments that stand out in my mind as far as her participation.
I mean, when you have a powerhouse like Matlin in there, I mean, yeah, I can agree. We ran into this problem when we were talking about the Adam Project. Where again the
Zoe part of it,
it was just like give this actor more spotlight. You know that they're going to make magic with it, you know.
But I'm actually glad that they saved the one spotlight scene for Marley that they did, because the mother-daughter relationship spoke volumes to me in both their conflict and in their resolution. And Matlin, it was beautifully done for me.
It really was. I mean, like, again, we have like this, we have chemistry. We have this chemistry between Jones and Kotzer. We have chemistry between Jones and Matlin. And in like a 2-minute scene where they're just having dinner, and then it erupts into an argument where you can absolutely tell that Jackie loves her daughter so very much. And she knows what she's going through, and she just wants to protect her, but not like a corny kind of cringy of way.
It was an experience-based fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, this happened to me, and I didn't want this to happen to you, but you'll never understand because you're a teenager and I'm the adult.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, even though we have like these two forces like butting heads, it was very easy to see how each of the characters were teaching each other things. You know, that's how we're able to get the co-op with Jackie managing it, and that's how we're also able to get in the audition scene where Ruby Ashley falls back onto what she knows, and she begins to sign while she's singing the song. And at that point, you realize that she's not singing it for the judges. I think she's singing it for her mom. I don't think it's even for her family. I think she's singing it to Jackie.
For me,
yeah,
she's finally admitting to herself who she is, and that she's valid as a whole person.
That's true.
That is part of her. 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 And she brings it all together.
Yeah. And then they do it at the proper point too. Like, this movie had 2 climaxes in its sense, which you had to be careful with that, because if it doesn't make sense in the story.
You watch your back.
You have to be careful, because if it doesn't make sense to the story, or if you don't have one uplifting the other, or if you have two of the 2 climaxes like hitting each other, where it's like a competition kind of from an editorial standpoint, I guess. I'm sounding like it sounds like I'm just using words for the sake of being of using words, but it's the multiple ending situation, right?
Yeah,
like,
and there was a multiple ending.
Yeah, but like, I think it was done enough so that like we see her audition, we see her get in with this lovely scene where everybody's just screaming at the top of their lungs. It's super cute, and in between those two, we see that again, that scene where father and daughter are finally understanding one another. You have to balance that correctly, otherwise people are going to be like, "Is it over yet? Oh, it's not? Okay, we got like 10 minutes left? Okay." It's really bad when that happens.
It's Lord of the Rings where you have another 45.
Exactly. It's Lord of the Rings syndrome. Going back a bit when it comes to the history of the movie, with jumping into kind of like the responses that, to your point, Andrus, how the hearing impaired community may have went into it. And also when it comes to its production, let's talk about production really quick. Just from the wiki page, CODA was written and directed by Cian Heder. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
I do not, yeah.
Is an English language remake of the French language film La Famille Bellier.
So it's a family.
Yeah.
The family Bellier.
Yeah. Which was released.
Let's bastardize it really quick.
Very good, right?
Bellier.
The family Bellier, which was, oh my God, sorry, which was released in 2014 and was successful at the French box office. Philippe Roselet was one of the original film's producers, and he had the rights to do the remake. He and producer Patrick Voxberger approached Heder to direct the remake for a United States audience. Heder said they were interested in adapting the film, but they wanted someone to make it unique and take the promise from the original and also reinvent it. By May 2019, the companies Pathé Film and Vendôme Group had formed a film production partnership to develop and produce English-language films, with the first being CODA, which was set and filmed in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Some accolades that they got from the hearing impaired and deaf community. Again, from the wiki, USA Today reported deaf viewers' varied reactions to the film. They praised the casting and performances of deaf actors and found the depiction of deaf actors as self-sufficient and sexually active people to be in welcome contrast to previous depictions of them on screen. Delbert Wetter, vice chair of the nonprofit Respectability, said, quote, "After seeing so many stories where people with disabilities are depicted as helpless, forlorn souls needing to be rescued, it is so refreshing to see a story with deaf characters that are small business owners and leaders in their fishing community with depth and nuance that rival and even exceed that of their hearing counterparts in the story." And I could not agree more, quite honestly, in regards to it. Going a couple steps towards making a community that has not been the forefront of a lot of films and up-pointed cinema, so that they seem to be what they are in reality, just people who are just trying to live their lives, can be very, very challenging when it comes to proper depiction. And I'm very happy not being a member of the deaf community. And Andrus, you hit it right in the head. It's always a point of care when you're trying to see this through the lens of somebody else when you don't have the experience to really feel it the way that they do. I definitely feel good when we, get information from experts that let us know that, hey, you know what? This was a good depiction. This was a good job. It's always reassuring to me.
Yeah. I like hearing those comments. That's nice to hear the validation in there, and the not slander within the community. And,
yeah,
and just,
I mean, even when it's like not the focus, right? Even when it's done accidentally, right, it's still done. Right. And if people can take the opportunity to learn from past mistakes as to how people with disabilities are depicted and just do a better job of it, then they're doing their job well. Regardless of like the pacing and the problems I do have with this film, I love the characters, and like we mentioned before, I loved how the dialogue and the acting supplied real feeling, real humanity. They weren't just a label. These, as they are in real life, people who are hearing impaired. This is going to sound terrible, but I mean, newsflash. People with disabilities have souls too, and they should be depicted as if they do. And when the mark is missed, it can be disheartening for sure.
It feels weird when there's like any talk of prejudice against anybody that is considered to have a disability, because in my own life, if there was ever any of those feelings, it would have been when I was way younger and didn't know any better. Yeah. And maybe because somebody said something at one point. But I've been proven wrong so many times since then that it's just like, no, it's just like, in fact, the people with disabilities as a qualifier,
right,
the ones that I know are anything but.
Well said.
I mean, they're athletes, they're musicians, they're the top of their game, they're top of their craft. Like whatever it is they do, they excel at it. They're not struggling.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't say that they don't have struggles. I have struggles.
Right.
But it's always one of those things where like, why is there a prejudice there? Why is there any judgment there?
It doesn't make any sense to me, quite honestly. It really doesn't.
Right.
I can understand like when you're younger and I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying in that regard either. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
I don't either.
But that's one thing too. Like to another point that you were talking about earlier in the recording too. I learned something from this movie, and whenever I can do that, where I earnestly learn something from a performance or from the real trials that are being depicted within this work of fiction, that's wonderful for me. When you learn about.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask, because I know what the answer is based on at least my knowledge of ASL.
Yeah.
Did you feel like any of the ASL performances felt bigger or larger than what they needed to be?
No. I think
good.
I think that like that, and again, like that's coming from somebody who doesn't speak with ASL. But I think that if anything, it added to it. Like we were talking about it a little bit. How just the characterizations.
The doctor visits.
Oh my god, man, it was so great. It was so good, and like the arguments they're having were like it brings me back to when we did The Sound of Metal. The conversations in The Sound of Metal when they're slamming on the table, but they're not doing it in a rude way. It's just say, oh my gosh, yeah, I agree with you, or something like that.
I need your attention because I need to communicate with you. You're the one I need to speak with.
It's that same dynamic, but cranked up to 11. And it makes sense when you see these characters as a whole. That's how they would talk. That's a beautiful thing, too. When I see Kotzer and Matlin, and when I see Durant and Jones sign, I can hear their voices in their words. I can hear their characterizations, like what words they're going to explore more, like how mad they are at the dialogue and that kind of thing. It's a beautiful thing. It really is.
So the round table that we discussed when I referenced the round table, the Hollywood Reporter roundtable interview, did feature Emilia Jones for her performance in this. So awesome. part of her discussion, also Power of the Dog, we talked about Kirsten Dunst and some other actresses in that as well. But the thing that impressed me with Emilia is she's basically, known within the industry because she got the opportunity to audition for this, and you have to be at a certain level in order to get an audition this size. Right. But respectively not known by the public, right?
Right.
But the thing that she said was she didn't know any sign language before this film.
Damn.
Well, okay, so there's that, right?
Yeah.
So she didn't know any sign language before this film. And part of the interview that was so fascinating for me is she was talking about how in order for her first round audition, there was some sort of issue with time or with appointment or something like that. But she eventually did make her appointment or sent in a self-tape. Mm-hmm. And there was some sort of delay in there that allowed her to practice her signing.
Interesting.
To the point where she did a little bit of research, and there was something where she had to finger sign a lot of what the dialogue was.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you're saying a name, well, there's no sign specifically for a name. So you would give a assignment and then spell it out. And then you use that assignment for the rest of it. But you still have to spell it out.
Yeah.
Right. So if I was saying my name is Robert, I might put an R up on the top of my crown and then spell out Robert. And then that's going to be Robert for the rest of this conversation.
Oh my God. That's
right?
great. Yeah.
So something similar to that. But the thing that was so exciting to me about that is she got so much extra practice time in her finger spelling that when she did the audition and got feedback on our audition, they said she blew everybody out of the water as far as her signing skills go.
Yeah.
And that allowed her to go to the next phase of the audition process.
Happy accidents. So, yeah.
Diligence and preparation and tenacity and everything else that goes into it. I gained so much respect for her when she said it. And once I saw
very
her
impressive.
With all of these people that have been doing it for years,
decades,
I was looking for errors and I didn't see any.
That's amazing.
So I was very, very impressed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think like that's the thing too. Like it was a situation where though we may have disagreements in regards to the flow and how much it may have grasped your heart and maybe qualifications for actually being an Oscar contender. I mean, I'm right on board with you when it comes to the cast. They were all an absolute joy to watch, and that's the reason as to why I think the movie got.
You know, the other thing about that though is in comparison to all of the other films, I haven't seen all of them, so I don't know what the answer is on that.
Right,
but Is this one a standout compared to the other films that were nominated for the category of
I don't
Best
think
Picture
so.
to why this would stand out amongst the group?
I don't think so. I think actually, and I'm leaning hard on Power of the Dog that we talked about in an earlier episode. The story with that one was pretty lethargic as well. But when you saw the dynamic between Cumberbatch and Dunst, and like the way in which the cast was able to get into play, and just the chemistry that was probably, I think, benefited by. I mean, the way the director made them live together in a sense, really, sure. and the method acting that was put up in the proper amount of time lended to the cast being able to do so well with that film. Those same tactics weren't taken with CODA, but the dynamic between the characterization here is what fed the film. And I think that's probably going to be a pattern that we're going to see with other films that we're going to talk about that, received a nomination. The story, it's lethargic. It's an after-school special. I could predict what was going to happen 15 minutes in the film. But when you see what those, for lack of a better term, unoriginal, but I mean, look, what are you going to do, right? I mean, there's no such thing as originality anymore. Everyone's inspired from much.
Right. It's just another story told in a different way.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, but the way in which that's delivered through the characters, a breath of fresh air on both counts. And actually, you know what? Even with the Adam Project that we talked about a couple episodes ago, it was a characterization. It was these dynamics between the lead actor and the kid. It was these things with the father-son relationship that's getting pushed through. I think that when it comes to a lot of blockbusters that we've talked about, and the Oscars are kind of like the epitome of this particular subject matter,
sure.
It is ensemble-driven pieces of art. It's not special effects. It's not screenplay. It's not writing that we've seen in past years and that we've talked about in past episodes. It's about the people in front of the camera and how they can relate to each other more so than, more so than I've seen in a long time, quite honestly. But that being said, we have gotten to the end of the episode. Let's go into specialities. We talked a bit on characterizations. What are some things that you want people who are going to watch this movie, what are some things you want them to pick up when it comes to the actors here, Andrus? What are some of the Easter eggs or whatever that kind of surprised you while you were watching?
Well, definitely just like learning another language and doing a performance in a different language.
Oh yeah.
It's the same thing with this for Emilia Jones. So she really super impressed me by doing what she did here.
For sure.
As far as her subtleties,
and
choices, and in her conflicts, whether that's internal or external, I thought that she did a terrific job.
Yeah.
The chemistry between the boy Miles for me was definitely one that grew and flourished, and I think in right time for the movie.
Yeah.
Because of all of the things that we weren't necessarily included on. We know that she joined the choir because of him.
Yes. Yeah.
That was very easily said. I mean, talk about a cliche moment. We're talking about the director picking the two of them to do a duet. Oh my gosh, what shocker.
Yeah.
Right? No. No. But I mean, there were a lot of those things, so I do understand the mentality behind to which your perspective is coming. But there were so many amazing things about the cliche music director is cliche for a reason,
right?
And that because if all of us had that same music teacher in school, we're on board instantly.
Absolutely. I did love that character. Mr.
He did it with his own flair. He did it with his own interpretation of what it was. And I thought that he did it very, very believably, authentically, and everything that comes to mind there.
Mm-hmm.
The family was beautifully done. I want to throw a shout out to the best friend character too, Gertie.
By Amy Forsyth, golly,
yeah.
What a spitfire! That's a terrible thing to say.
In just a beautiful, supportive best friend way.
Absolutely.
There wasn't any major conflict with the best friend, which I actually appreciated because I felt like that would take away from it. especially when a spoiler happens and there could be a conflict. There wasn't, which is great.
It is great.
And another thing that I wanted to say earlier, but I didn't, was the bullying aspect in this film. I'm so glad that we felt that side of it.
Yeah.
And then music director calls her out and says, "What, you think you're the only one that's ever been bullied?
I know.
You know?" So I love the fact that that was a thing within this film, but it really didn't explore the other side of that.
It was subtle. It was subtle, right? It wasn't a situation.
We didn't get into the bullier side of it. We just felt how she felt in response to it.
And to your point that you made at the beginning of our conversation, where we see it from her perspective, I will absolutely agree with the fact that this movie was not trying to pretend to be something it wasn't. This movie knew exactly what it was. Right. It knew what tools it had on the field, and it just used them. And I can understand specifically.
And specifically with the actors. The
absolutely,
actors
that's it.
Directly in that, and that is where I wanted to go with it.
Do you think that, and this is something where I think we're probably going to get an interesting answer, could other actors have done this? Like,
I knew you were going to ask me on that one, and I'm going to say they could have. It would not have been the magic that was created without this cast.
It sounds like a no to me then. So like that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I don't know many other actors.
Neither do I.
That could fit the bill.
Yeah.
As far as Amelia's circumstance, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Because there are so many talented actors out there that could learn the skill and that can sing and that can perform everything that needs to happen in there.
Sure.
But the wonderful thing that I felt that really, really, really worked for Amelia was the timing on this.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is another performer that could have done this in the time frame that it was done.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I think that she was the right choice, and I think that they did a terrific job in casting.
I love it when we run into that, because majority of the good movies that we see.
I can see so many other A-listers fill in this or that or whatever, but I mean, when you have a deaf actress like Marlee Matlin, who are you going to put in there? You're going to put Marlee Matlin in there.
No, for sure.
There are some other actors that we were introduced in Sound
of Metal. Yeah.
Sound of Metal. Mm-hmm. And so many good performances in that one too, that could have been a family member or part of this community, but this just felt right.
Yeah, it did feel right.
I'm wondering if they had any question on a backup character.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I can appreciate where you're coming from, and I definitely agree with it. I think from a sound perspective, this was pretty easy, quite honestly.
Sure.
I mean, you get like, these lovely soundscapes that you can. I mean, if somebody really wanted to, like the main sound mixer could go out there with a boom mic and spend just a full day and just record. Just for ambiance and that kind of thing. One thing that I did like was the use of Joni Mitchell in the film, because that was one of her songs was used for the audition piece, and I really did enjoy the kind of music that Mr. V was using to teach these kids how to sing. It wasn't going for like the quick grab where it's like, okay, this is the latest Justin Bieber tune, and look at this. It wasn't like an episode of Glee. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say a WB series.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I think that's what one of the things that Mr. V was actually talking about. I think he has a line somewhere where he's like, "This isn't an episode of Glee," or "You watch too much Glee," or something.
He did say that. Yeah. He said this is not an episode of Glee,
and I find that refreshing because also this is going to be a point of my own bias, and that goes back to Mr. V as a character. Those were but before I was studying Bach and Mussorgsky and Mahler and stuff like that in an earlier life, we were also studying just like Disney film music. We were studying like Elvis. We were studying like the Temptations and that kind of thing, because they're just so competent. And I'm glad to see that it was a situation where we were looking at these oldies that, because of the way in which those songs evolved, from earlier points in musicology, how we have the music that we have now. I would have been disappointed if all of a sudden Mr. V started bringing out a turntable and everybody started singing like dubstep or something like that. That would have bothered me.
Sure.
But besides that, everything else was really general, really simple. But that's what you want, because the sound, again, and they did this with, they did a better job of it in Sound of Metal, but it's a completely different dynamic, where the silence in Sound of Sound of Metal has its own characterization because it offered more dynamics with this man. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Here it's more of like a gentle cushion, but I really do appreciate the fact that there wasn't any music playing when the family was having big conversations. There were like these usual predictable kind of stabs here and there, like when something funny happens and they're done talking, but the sound and the music. The music never overstepped its bounds. It was nice and it was supportive, and the ambiance, the soundscape, was mastered very well, and it was quiet enough and loud enough when it had to be to support the dialogue that was happening.
My question for you on that is, there were a couple of references to everything being too loud, such as when Ruby is trying to focus on her homework and everybody in the house is just so noisy that she can't concentrate, and she has a blow up moment about that. And then there's also a reference to the sound being too loud on the boat. Did they because I'm just oblivious to the sound mixing and stuff like that, the sound editing, do you think that they overly emphasized those sounds in those moments to let the audience participate in that? Or do you feel like it was just an honest sound mix?
Well, we don't have any kind of notation or anything in regards to how the mastering process was pushed forth. I was listening to it just for my TV, so I didn't have a way in which I could, compare things throughout the movie.
So you have your sound system with 24 speakers
I know, exactly,
directly at your face.
Oh my God, back in the day.
Marty McFly goes up.
I have to get the EQ right between 4 and 5K, because that's where my UHD amplifier is going to be. I thought that they probably did boost it a little bit to put us in Ruby's place, but I don't think it was bourgeois. I don't think it was like too much. I thought it was I felt that with her, quite honestly. I was getting annoyed at Frank when he was
seriously
just clocking at the barbecue, or whatever the hell he was doing.
It was obnoxious.
It was obnoxious.
I think beautifully done.
Yeah, me too. But that being said, guys, we're going to call it a day with this episode. Quite honestly, listen, it won the Oscar for a reason. And if you do want to watch a film that, first of all, had a great ad campaign, but secondly, was able to meet it up and be worth all the praise, for the most part, I think you would not be disappointed. And if you want something that's going to make you feel good, that's going to give you a masterclass in family dynamic and chemistry between actors, then by all means, yes, crack open CODA, take a look. And then after you're done watching it, let us know in the comments. Do you think that we were right? Do you think we were wrong? I mean, it's a situation, too, where, we may be wrong, but it's your job to tell us. We really do appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for, just giving us some of your time. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on SoundCloud. Email us, pullfocuspod@gmail.com. And, we'll be ready to talk and turn and do what we can to provide you more opinions with the next film that we're going to be talking about. Andrus, as usual, always an absolute pleasure. You are a bright light in these dark times, my friend, and I am so very happy to be able to talk with you as usual. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you back. Always a pleasure on my side, sir.
How do you sign thank you? It's like your hand down here.
Yeah.
Thank you, then. Thank you. But we will...
Touch your chin and place it forward.
Lovely. We will talk to everybody later, and, stay good, be good to each other, and we'll see what happens next. Bye.